Bridget as well. It's definitely an honor and a pleasure to speak today. Um, Very excited. This is something that's near and dear to me, talking about retirement planning and talking about different ways and strategies to optimize your 401k plan. And so again, as Bridget mentioned, my name is Jarrell Harvey, and I'm a financial advisor in the Wealth Management Group. And today, we're going to cover quite a few topics. And so we're going to first just really take a high-level view from our conversation. We're going to talk about some of the various sources of retirement income. We will also discuss some of the challenges faced by retirement savers. And then we're going to start to really get into the crux of our conversation to talk about why a 401k is important, and then talk about ways that we can optimize it. I'm going to give you a little bit of detail and background on the differences of some of the common 401k plans. So you have a traditional 401k plan as well as a Roth 401k, and we'll talk about the differences between those two. And then we will also discuss and go into depth about some of the common features, such as employer contributions, vesting schedules, automatic enrollment, and how those things may also impact your saving as a participant in the 401k plan. And then we're going to discuss just some investments and some different ways that you can save and invest your money within inside the 401k plan that are simple and easy, and also just to get you on the track of filling out what would be the best risk and return based on your needs and your goals. And then we're going to really close out our conversation today by talking about some of the portability. And so for many of us, we may change employers or change jobs multiple times. So we want to talk about how can you still control your assets once you change jobs. And then we'll talk about one other different key topic that many people may have an interest in, or maybe at some point have a need in, and that are the ways you can maybe take loans out of your 401k. And we'll talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages of that opportunity as well. So according to the Social Security Administration, in order to maintain your current lifestyle, you would need approximately 80 to 90% of your current annual income in retirement. But the real question lies, where would this income come from? And so in the past, many financial planners have referred to the three-legged stool. And the three-legged stool really consists of three different components. One component is Social Security. The second component is private pensions. And then the third component is savings and investments. And so recently, that pie, or even those three stools, have started to change and evolve. And so as you can see on your screen, based on some surveys and statistics that was taken last year in 2013, Social Security made up about 30%, 36% of a person's income during retirement, while savings and investments equaled about 32%. And now, because of the industry is starting to change and evolve, that private pension piece has started to become smaller and smaller. And so as of last year, only about 9% of a person's income during retirement came from that source. And my expectation and my belief is that that part of the pie is going to actually get smaller and smaller as more corporations do away with their pension plans. The other caution point is that there's a possibility that the Social Security component can also get smaller if the government or the administration starts to do any kind of reform to that program. And so at the end of the day, a lot of the responsibility is going to fall on to the individual to save and invest more. And so with that, you have a couple of different options. So as I mentioned, you can save and invest more. You can either work longer or get a second job or take on maybe start a business during retirement, or you may have to reduce the amount of spending and expenses that you have in a retirement. At the end of the day, that responsibility is still going to fall on the individual. So some of the challenges that's right now that many investors and people who are participating in their 401k and who are planning for retirement are facing is that individuals are experiencing longer lives. And so I was looking at a recent statistic, and it said that if you take a married couple and both of those individuals are 65 years or older, there is a 50% chance that one of those individuals within that married couple will live to the age of 90 or beyond. And so because of different advancements in health and we're living just longer and healthier lifestyles, many people are living longer. And so your income has to expand and has to work for you for longer periods of time. As I mentioned earlier, there are some concerns about Social Security and how that's going to impact people over a period of time. And then there's other two big buckets that can potentially hurt people that oftentimes go unnoticed. And so one of those areas is taxes. And so many times once you get into retirement, once you start to take out distributions from your 401k plan, that income will be taxed. And so you have to have an understanding of what tax bucket and category that you're going to be in and how that may impact you. And the other bucket is inflation. And so we always know that prices and the cost of goods are continuously going to go up. I can remember when I first started to drive many years ago that I could get a gallon of gas below $1. But now, just recently I went to the pump and I paid over $3.50 in my local area. So again, we know that the cost of various goods and services are going to consistently move higher. And so we need to plan for that accordingly and make sure that our assets and our investments are also going at a pace that are similar to or at least greater than the taxes and inflation. And so the one question really lies is that, do I have enough to retire? And so there's a lot of ways that you can go about trying to figure that out, but a recent retirement confidence survey revealed that many workers have not taken the necessary planning steps to know how much they need to save to reach their retirement goals. And so if you haven't done that, you're really missing the boat, because without a plan, it's hard to know what direction that you're going into. And so at least knowing how much you need to save and how much growth you need to get to reach your retirement income goals, that's the first step in planning to making sure that your 401k plan is working aligned with what your needs and goals are. And so the question is this: what is a 401k and why a 401k? And again, what are some of the common features and benefits of a 401k plan? And so a 401k is a very simple, convenient, and flexible way to start to save for retirement. Ultimately, you decide how much to invest, and you can adjust how much you contribute and change your investment options in accordance with whatever your goals and your needs are. And so for a traditional 401k plan, the contributions will come out pre-tax, meaning that before any tax is taken out of your money, that money goes into a salary deferral that never gets taxed until you actually start to take distributions from your money. Also, while that money is invested, it's growing tax deferred. So again, no taxes are being inflicted on that portion of your money. Within inside the 401k plans, there are a number of professionally managed investment options, so you don't necessarily always have to choose or know the best way to invest your money. You can rely on the expertise and the knowledge of professionally managed investors. Also, a key component which we're going to dive into a little deeper in our conversations, really talk about diversification and the various ways that you can diversify your assets within inside of a 401k. As I mentioned, portability. There are ways once you leave your current employer to also still maintain control of your assets to either whether you're moving it to your new company or moving into an IRA that you direct or manage or that a financial advisor manages for you. And then one of the things that I really also like about 401k is that companies can also match your giving, which can also add to the amount of money that you're saving. And this is oftentimes a nice incentive that companies will offer their employees to have them to try to save money. And then again, as I mentioned in the beginning, that is a convenient way because the money comes out without you having to write a check, without you having to really make a commitment to remember to make all those payroll contributions. And so it's automatically done for you on your behalf. And so, as I mentioned, there are two main types of 401k plans. And so the most common is your traditional 401k plan. And as I stated earlier, a traditional 401k plan involves a retirement account that is set up by employers where you can defer part of your salary on a pre-tax basis into the plan. So inside of a traditional 401k plan, the federal income tax is not paid on the money at all before you put it in or while it's growing. However, your salary deferrals are still subject to FICA and FUTA taxes. And so what that means is that you are still paying into Social Security, you're still paying into Medicare, you're still paying into unemployment as well. And so even though you're not getting any federal taxes, you are still getting some taxes that's taken out of your account with those deferrals. So currently, as of this year, the maximum contribution that a person can make inside of their 401k plan is $17,500. And also, if you're at least the age of 50 or older, they also have a component that allows you to do a catch-up contribution, which is $5,500. So in total, for individuals that are 50 years or older, they can potentially contribute up to $23,000 in a given year. And so the other second type of common 401k plan is a Roth 401k. And so the difference with a Roth is that the money that you contribute inside your 401k goes in after tax. And so the difference is the money goes in after tax, but once you start to take out distributions from that account, the distributions will come out free of federal income tax. And so in order to withdraw your funds tax-free from the Roth 401k, the distribution must occur 5 taxable years after the initial contribution, and the participant either attains the age of 59.5, dies, or becomes disabled. So again, for the traditional 401k, the money goes in tax deferred, or you don't pay any taxes on it, but once you take the distributions, you start to pay taxes on any kind of earnings at the time of distribution. But again, for the Roth 401k, you pay the taxes ahead of time, but at the time of distributions, the money comes out tax-free. And so again, as I mentioned, there's some of the tax benefits of the Roth 401k, and when is it better to maybe consider one or the other? And so there's a number of different variables and different things that you consider when looking at that component. And so number one, generally speaking, individuals in the following categories may benefit from utilizing a Roth 401k. So if you expect to be in a higher tax bracket when you retire, a Roth 401k may be a better choice since you may be able to avoid paying taxes on your earnings at a later time. Also, many younger employees will have a longer retirement horizon, therefore they may have more time to accumulate tax-free earnings. Another different one is like employees who aren't eligible for a Roth IRA may take advantage of this. And so if you try to invest in a Roth IRA outside of a 401k plan, they have certain income limitations. And so if you exceed the various income barriers that they have to participate in a Roth IRA, this may be a way that you can contribute inside a Roth component type of retirement account, and then later on in life, when you start taking distributions, get that money tax-free. I've also seen it where some employees will take advantage of both of them. And so they may have a percentage of their money going into a pre-tax component, and they may have another percentage going into an after-tax component. But again, it all depends on your needs and your goals and what would make the most sense for you from a tax efficient standpoint. Another thing that just kind of want to make you aware of is that a tax credit is provided to low and moderate income savers who contribute to eligible retirement plans, such as a 401k or an IRA. And so that tax credit would depend on your adjusted gross income. And this chart right here illustrates based on how you file your taxes, whether you're an individual, you're a head of household, or you're filing jointly, how much you can earn and how much of the tax credit that you will receive based on those earnings. So that's just another thing, one of the benefits of contributing to a retirement account. And I just wanted to highlight that the credit isn't available for taxpayers under the age of 18, to full-time students, or to any dependents. So as I mentioned a little earlier, that employers are allowed to add contributions to their employees' accounts. And so contributions to a 401k plan can come from employers from various different types. And so one way they contribute is through a fixed rate of each participant's pay, and that's oftentimes considered a profit-sharing contribution. Or employers can contribute at a rate that depends on how much the employee contributes to a 401k plan, and oftentimes that's known as a matching contribution. And so for the matching contribution, that's usually set at a certain percentage, and if you contribute up to, let's say, 4%, the company will match on that first 4% that you also contribute. For the profit sharing component, that is oftentimes at the discretion of the employer, and so they may provide a contribution one year, but may not offer that contribution the next year. It really oftentimes depends on the profits and the earnings of the potential company based on how much they would give to an employer through the profit sharing plan. But again, both of these are ways that employers can contribute to their employees' retirement accounts. And the one thing I just also wanted to mention is that if your employer only matches up to the first 4% or 5% or whatever it is, that doesn't necessarily limit you to only contribute that 4 or 5%. The only thing is that you won't get any matching for anything that exceeds that amount. So you're always able to contribute more than the matching component as well. One of the things that we're starting to see a lot of employers do just to encourage more saving from their employees is what they call automatic enrollment and automatic increases. And so with automatic enrollment, it's a feature that allows the employer to automatically enroll employees into the retirement plan once they become eligible. And so many times this bypasses the employee having to actually go in and set up the account on their own. And it's an easy way to get employees get involved and get engaged with saving on their behalf. The automatic increase is a mechanism that's set up that allows the amount of contributions that you are contributing to your account to increase at a set increment. So that can maybe be on a yearly basis, a bi-yearly basis, whatever it is, but it allows them to increase the amount of saving that they're doing. And many times I've seen employers or participants to lock this in step with the amount of like salary increase. And so if your salary increases each year by 1 or 2%, and then they'll all, many times have that automatic increase within the 401k plan to also increase by that same amount. It's just another feature to allow participants to save more. And so many times when an employer or employee participates in the automatic increase or the automatic enrollment, they don't go in to set up their investments under their own discretion. So a qualified default investment alternative, also known as a QDIA, is a mechanism that was instituted for plan sponsors to help set the allocation or the investment criteria for their employees. And so this QDIA, what will happen is you will start to invest your money or start to save periodically, and it will automatically go into a set type of investment that the company chooses. And so this investment portfolio may be based on the person's age, it may be based on their risk, or it may be based on different type of managed accounts. And so if you have an employee that's, let's just say, age 50, they already have a set criteria of how that portfolio should be balanced based on amount of stocks, amount of bonds, amount of cash that would be aligned with that person's age. And what this QDIA does, it takes a lot of the liability and the fiduciary responsibility from the employers, because it's a mechanism that should be prudent based on the person's risk tolerance or their age. So one of the biggest questions and concerns that many participants have when they are participating in a 401k is, what are the investments I should choose, and how do I go about selecting the right investments so my money can grow in line with my goals and my needs? And so there are a number of different things that you need to consider. So the first thing you need to look at is your investment objectives. And some of the things that you may want to ask yourself is that, am I primarily concerned with growth, or am I looking for income? You may also want to look at, what you are saving for in regards to how much risk you're willing to take. So how much potential portfolio volatility am I able to be comfortable with? The other thing is that you're looking at your time horizon. So how long would I be investing for? When do I plan to retire? The other bucket is the asset allocation, which we're going to talk a lot more about, because that's really a key driver to determining the performance of your portfolio. And all these components are related to each other. And so one of them cannot be as a standalone. They have to be interrelated when you're considering what type of investments to choose and which ones to go with. And so, as I mentioned, one of the first things you want to look at is your time horizon. And so the time horizon generally affects the amount of risk that you can take or you will want to take. And so the time horizon basically looks at what date or what time do I want to start taking distributions from my account. And so if your retirement is still 20 years away, normally that would just say I have a 20-year time horizon for each individual. One of the other things that we're often, a word that gets thrown around a whole lot, is diversification. And so at the end of the day, diversification is like, what does it really mean? So diversification is just your ability to combine various different assets or asset classes, such as stocks, bonds, and cash. And the key thing about diversification is having assets that do not necessarily move or are closely correlated, so they may behave differently. And so let me give you a quick example. And so what I've seen many times before is that some participants and investors, many times they would think they're diversified just because they have a lot of different investments. And so they will have, one stock and another stock, but those assets may behave quite similar. And so at the end of the day, you may not really be diversified as much as you think. So one company may be like Home Depot, and then you may also have another company like Lowe's. Both of those companies are in the home improvement industry. And so typically, when that industry is doing well, both stocks are doing well. However, think about a couple of years ago when we started to have the downturn in the housing market, both stocks probably also experienced some downturn as well. And so even though you may have multiple stocks or different type of securities, if they're not diversified or they are in different industries or behave differently, you really might not be as diversified as you may believe. And so the key thing, again, is having different type of asset classes and also have different type of styles, because you don't want to have an over-concentration in any single type of asset class. And ultimately, this will help to reduce your risk and also reduce your volatility and allow you to have a smoother return over a period of time. And so again, this just basically reiterates what I just mentioned about that asset allocation is the process of developing a diversified portfolio by combining different asset classes in varying proportions. And so some of the common asset classes that are out there, there are stocks, there are bonds, and there's cash. And these are the three most common. And so stocks are basically when you have ownership within a company. Bonds are known as like a loan that you can. So when you own a bond, you're basically giving money to a certain government or municipality or corporate agency to borrow that money to go out to maybe build roads, build schools, or whatever the need is for it. And then cash is like money markets, CDs, and treasury bills. And so typically, stocks are known to having a greater amount of risk, but they also will have a greater amount of potential for return. Bonds would be like that middle ground, less risky than stocks typically, but you also will have a lower amount of return. And then cash equivalents are known as the safest bucket, but you have very little growth potential when you're talking about the cash equivalents. And we can see that many times right now if we are vested in some of our banks. We know that those accounts are maybe earning very little to no amount of interest whatsoever. And so the challenge with that, with being in all cash, is that you open yourself up to the potential of inflation risk. And so all these various asset classes have various risks associated with them. They are just different type of risk. And so let's take, for instance, bonds. Bonds may have a greater risk to interest rates. So as interest rates start to go up, which they may do pretty soon, your bond portfolio may reduce their value because they move in inverse relationships. So when interest rates go up, bond values go down. So you need to be aware of some of the risks that are associated with bonds. And again, as I mentioned, stocks, they do have some risk as well. They are typically a lot more volatile. So their returns and their performance can be dictated very much on the market. And when I say the market, I'm really talking about the S&P 500. The S&P 500 is the 500 largest stocks within the U.S., and that is normally used as a gauge of how the market is doing. But again, with asset allocation, your portfolio should consist of a component of all three of these asset classes. And then some other asset classes that may be out there are like real estate, you may have commodities, and those are some other different areas that can, maybe make up your portfolio and ultimately reduce some of that volatility, reduce some of your risk exposure that you may have. And so within inside of a 401k plan, many companies have started to set up what they call target date funds for their employees. And so again, this is a very simple and easy way for participants to start to contribute money based on a certain target or date. And normally that target date would be associated with a set date when a person is planning to retire. And so let's just say, for instance, if you're planning to retire in 5 years, you might want to invest in that 2020 target date. Or again, if you wanted to maybe retire in 15 years, you may want to look at that 2030 target date. And again, the portfolio within that target date would be aligned based on a lot of history and analytics that's been done of what is the best risk and return measurement for you based on your retirement age or your retirement date. And normally what you would see on this next slide is that target dates, normally the farther you out, the more aggressive they would be. And so if you have 20 or 30 years until retirement, that portfolio is typically going to be more growth oriented versus if you're going to be retiring within 5 years, that one is pretty much more income oriented. And it's going to be reflected in how those assets are allocated in a portfolio. So the white component reflects the bonds, the light blue component reflects the stocks, and then the green component again is the cash. And you can see how the allocation moves over a period of time as you get closer to a certain target date. And so what are some of the benefits for target date funds? They offer a lot of simplicity. They are a single investment, and so for many times employees or participants, they don't have to select all the various funds that are available to them. So they don't have to individually select a stock fund, a bond fund, or a certain type of cash fund. It's already bundled and packaged together. Again, they already have a certain asset allocation. Normally they are very diversified products, and then they automatically rebalance. And so I want to talk a little bit about just what rebalancing is and what it does. And so normally these target date funds will have a certain amount of percentage they go inside each asset class. And so for instance, you may have 30% to stocks, you may have 60% that will go to bonds, and then you have 10% that's the cash. And if the portfolio skews, if it goes beyond a certain threshold where it exceeds, again, if it was stocks and you was set to have 30%, and say if it goes up to 35 or 40%, the portfolio will automatically rebalance to get it back to the percentage. And that way your portfolio is not drifting or becoming too aggressive or too conservative based on what your goals and your needs are. And that's automatically done within target date funds. The other thing on the downside that you need to be cautious about or know is that target date funds do not have any kind of guarantees. So there's no set percentage that they're guaranteed to return on a given year. They still have investment risk. There are still costs that are associated with them. Um, and then also you have to look at, are the target date funds best for me, especially if retirement is a far way down the road for you. You may be better suited with picking some individual investments. So you have to always consider the pros and cons of each investment. One of the things that I really wanted to mention, and I maybe need to just to step back, we talked about some of the various are common asset classes, and I mentioned stocks, I mentioned bonds, and we mentioned cash. Typically, within inside of a 401k plan, you will have different type of mutual funds. So you will have a stock fund, a bond fund, or maybe a cash fund. And all of a mutual fund is a pool. It's a pool of investments. And so within a stock fund, you may have 20 or 30 different stocks or more. Or inside of a bond fund, you may have several different types of bonds. It's not just dedicated or allocated to one individual stock or one individual bond. It's actually, again, it's a pool or collection. And so typically, that is how most of the investments inside of a 401k plan are set up. They are normally various mutual funds. And so inside that mutual fund, you may have some that are focused on what are considered like large cap growth, and that would be like a maybe technology company like Apple. You may have like a large cap value fund, which may be more stable companies. And you can also maybe have like some small cap, some mid cap. On the bond side, you may have some international, you may have corporate bonds. So there's just, again, there's a variety. So you need to be, aware of, what are the pros and cons of each of those asset categories. And again, a target date fund may just be a simpler or easier approach because they already set the allocation to each one of those different asset categories on your behalf. And so this chart, what it really does, it illustrates and highlights the benefit for being a long-term investor. And so normally there are benefits for investing. And what this chart does, it actually shows the performance over the last 87 years, and it shows that over 70% of those years, 63 to be exact, the market has experienced the up period. But as we do know, the market will at times go down. And so one of the times the market was down most recently was in 2008. And you can see on this chart that in 2008, the market was down close to between 30 and 40%, actually almost closer to the 40% range. So again, we need to prepare to know that even though over a longer period of time, the market will have some ups and it will have some downs. And typically, the closer you get to retirement, the more conservative you want to be. Versus somebody who is younger in age, they might want to be more aggressive because they have more time to make up any kind of significant losses that they may experience in their portfolio. But again, that is when you want to go back and you look at your time horizon, you look at your goals. Do you want growth? Do you want income? And what you're trying to save for? And that's how you can, again, you can determine how aggressive or how conservative you want to be in your portfolio. So again, this is the when I mentioned a little earlier about the portability for your 401k plan. So 401k assets are eligible to be rolled over into an IRA. So this can be an IRA that you manage and direct on your own, or it can be an IRA that is managed by a specific financial advisor or a financial firm on your behalf. You can also roll over 401ks to other employer-sponsored plans such as a 403B, a 457, or to other 401k plans. And so, again, it's a convenient way to maybe keep your assets consolidated, also to maybe manage your assets. And this actual topic is something that we're going to jump into and dive a little deeper next week. So I would encourage anyone on this call, if you have more questions about some of the portability features, about transferring assets, rolling assets over, and some of the pros and cons of that, please tune into the webinar that we plan to have scheduled for next week, and we go a lot more deeper into this specific detail or feature. So one of the questions that I often get asked is, should I borrow from my 401k? And so it really depends on the individual. I would say that taking a loan out of your 401k should be for emergency purposes. And so you need to really ask yourself, how important is the need? Is there a possibility that the funds can be obtained through other sources? You also want to look at whether you're planning to leave the job in the next few years, because you would be required to pay that money back within inside your 401k plan. And if you leave your job before that money is paid back, you do face the possibility of having to pay taxes on that money, or having to pay it in all one lump sum. So you'll have to consider all the pros and cons, but I would say it is a nice feature to have, but there are some pros and cons, which I'll go into just a little bit more. So I mentioned there's some tax treatment. And so when you normally take out a loan inside of a 401k plan, initially there are no taxes or penalties. Some of you may already be aware of that. If you normally, under normal situations, if you try to take distributions out of any kind of retirement source, whether it's a 401k plan or an IRA, prior to the age of 59 and a half, you are subject to have to pay taxes on it, as well as a pre-penalty of 10%. However, with taking out a loan out of your 401k plan, you are able to bypass those taxes and penalties. On the flip side, when you have to pay the loan back, that loan is paid with after-tax money. And so when the loan is, since you're paying with after-tax money, and then once you start to take the distributions out in retirement, you're having to pay taxes on it again. So in reality, you are paying double taxes when you take out a loan in your account. And as I mentioned, if you leave a firm before the loan's paid off, or you're laid off for any type of reason, and if you do not pay that loan in full, that it's going to be considered to go on default, and it's going to be a taxable situation. However, I do want to just caution and let people know that the word default oftentimes scares people. It's not something that's going to go on your credit report. It's just a terminology that they use, and then, like as I mentioned, you'll have to report that income on your taxes. Again, some of the advantages that it is very convenient. Normally they have low rates, maybe between like 4 or 5%. The interest is you're paying it back to yourself, but again, be wary and know that that money is being taxed twice. And then this is already, just again, go over some of the downsides. So there are some fees that are associated with it. Normally, with paying the money back, they would just take the money directly out of your payroll, just like you're making your contributions. So it is oftentimes money that you don't have to see or have access to, but it's going directly back to pay off that loan. The other thing that you want to be cautious of is the opportunity cost. So when you're taking out that loan, that is money that could still possibly be available and could continue to be grown on your behalf. And so you have to think about the opportunity cost and the amount of return and growth that you may be losing out by taking loans from your account. So again, in summary, there are 3 major factors to consider when seeking to optimize your 401k plan. Number 1, save the right amount of money to drive your retirement income and increase over time as necessary. Number 2, develop an investment strategy and monitor that on an ongoing basis. And then lastly, know the distribution options to preserve your retirement income over a period of time. And so just wanted to make sure that we wrap up there. Now, Bridget, we can actually open it up to if anybody has any questions.
Thank you so much. The presentation was very insightful. And I urge anyone that they have any questions, please raise your hand or enter your questions at the bottom, and I would definitely read them out and we can get those answered. Actually scrolling down to see if we have anything. We do have a question. It comes from, what advice would you give a small business owner or entrepreneur that does not have a formal 401k set up? What are some other options for saving for retirement?
Okay, I mean, that's really a good question. So many times it would depend on how the company is structured. So for instance, what I mean by that, if you are a single owner or if it's just you and a spouse, you may want to look at opening up a solo 401k plan. And so that is a opportunity that you can look into to just to save for you and a spouse if y'all are the only employers or employees of the company. There are also a number of other different ways. You can always open up something outside of your company. You can always have a traditional IRA. Also, if you're under the income limitations that I had mentioned earlier, you can always open up a Roth. So those are two different type of retirement vehicles that you can open up outside of your company as well. The other things, there are other type of retirement accounts that you could potentially open, like a SEP IRA or a simple IRA. Well, many times, again, that would depend on what your goals are for yourself. If you have employees, do you want to make contributions mandatory or not mandatory? Will determine what type of retirement vehicle will be best for you and your company.
Okay, that sounds like that's a great answer. Do you have a question that, what if you're someone that has not been saving as you should and need to ramp up your saving for retirement? What should a person do in this situation?
Wonderful question. I think the first thing to do is just become active. And so many people always think it's too late, and it's never too late. Even though you may have to make some sacrifices, I would encourage you to, start immediately. Get with any kind of HR professional that you have at your company to see what steps you need to take to start to contribute on your behalf. The other things that I would say is to don't be afraid to start small. Do something that you're comfortable with, that is manageable for you initially, just to kind of like start to get into that habit of saving money. But if you have the resources to save more, I would definitely say take advantage of it. And so some of those things that we talked about earlier about the automatic increase, that's a great way to increase the amount of savings that you're contributing to your 401k plan, because that amount can automatically increase by 2, 3, or whatever amount that you want to increase it by on a given or annual basis. And so I would say maybe look at something that where you have an automatic step up in the contribution level that you are putting into your 401k plan. But don't hesitate. Get started immediately, and don't be afraid with just to start off something small or whatever you have available as some extra savings. And you would notice that after a time, you won't even miss out on the money because it's coming out before taxes, and it's money that's not necessarily hitting your account. And so you will start to get in the habit, and your savings and spending hopefully will also make the proper adjustment.
Okay. I see a last question. I borrowed against my 401k during the economic downturn. I'm now trying to pay it back but can't. My hours have been cut. Now what?
That is a difficult situation to be in, because most of the times I don't know if these plans really have a component where you can adjust the amount, because the interest it's going to start to accrue automatically. The best thing is to really step back and take a look at what your expenses are outside of the 401k plan, and really see where you can try to cut costs to make it work for you. Um, without that, there's really, not a lot of other options that are available to you um, if you don't have the income to pay it back. And I don't want to, encourage you to borrow more money, because that's going to just be more money that you have to ultimately pay back as well. So the only options that you really have is to figure out on the other side of the table how you could potentially, um, reduce your expenses, or, see if there's other options for you to earn some additional income from other sources outside of your current employer.
Okay. And just to piggyback off that question, I've worked with candidates myself that, had to resort to actually borrowing against their 401k, especially during the time when, like she mentioned, the economy took a downward turn. So if you do get to a point where, I know that you said that if the money is not given at a certain predetermined point of time, that taxes can occur, you're going to be incurring interest. Other than those two things, what are some penalties, like this young lady asked, if she just can't pay it back, she can't get a second job? Do they do anything to penalize the current funds that you have still in the 401k, if it's just no possibility of her paying it back, but she still wants to contribute?
And so normally what will happen, any kind of contributions that you are making towards that is actually going to pay back the loan before it goes to growing any asset. And so any money that is being paid back is going to the loan first. But to your point, is the other penalties. And so as I mentioned about the whole default, no, again, that would, if you do default on it, you would have to pay taxes at your ordinary income level, and then you also will incur that 10% penalty if you're under the age of 59 and a half.
Mm. Okay. And I think that's something that a lot of people should realize, and something that they should stress, that even though the money's there, that should be your last resort, because sometimes borrowing against your 401k can be more than just taking out a small personal loan.
Sure. And I totally understand. I'm very sensitive because uh, the economic downturn hit many people. And so I understand at that point, for some individuals, it was a last resort, and for people to tap into. So I totally understand that logic and that thought process. But unfortunately, there's not, a lot of other options if you can't, pay that money. And normally, let's just say if you leave a company or you're laid off from a company, it would normally be like, I think 60 to 90 days before that loan that technically goes into default. But again, it is your money. It's still your money. You still own that money. The only amount that you will have to pay taxes and have to pay the penalty on is the amount of money that you borrowed. And so if you only borrowed $10,000, you only have to pay taxes and that penalty on that $10,000 that you borrow, not the whole nest egg that you have in your savings account.
Okay, that's good to know. Well, I don't see any more questions, and we are at the top of the hour. Is there anything else that you'd like to add, or any type of takeaways that you'd like them to know before we close out?
Yeah, I mean, the main things that I would say is that, if you're not already contributing to a 401k, I would encourage you to get started sooner rather than later. Again, start off with a level that's just comfortable for you. If your company is matching, I would encourage you to at least try to contribute to the top level that they are matching so you can get that full extra benefit of the matching component. Thirdly, I would say, try to be aggressive as possible to save as much as you can as early as you can, because as we talked about earlier in the presentation, that there may be some modifications to Social Security potentially, especially if you are a much younger employee. Also, we saw that pensions are going away, so a lot of the responsibility is falling back on us to make sure that we have the necessary income during retirement. But my contact information is still available, and so if you have any questions or any needs, please feel free to reach me.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And if you do want to log in next week, you can sign up either by going to the website. We also have this posted on Eventbrite that our next workshop will be rolling over your 401k. So a 401k rollover workshop that will be held next Thursday on the 26th, same time, 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So definitely sign up for that. At the end of this workshop, there is a survey. It's about 10 questions. It pretty much asks you your overview of the workshop, anything that you'd like to see change, any recommendations that you'd like to give, and also give us feedback. What other topics would you like us to cover? So if you could take the time out to fill out that survey, the feedback is very, very helpful so we know how to better our best. And again, I do want to thank you, Gerald, for taking the time out today to partner up with us and give this workshop. And we look forward to your workshop next week. Thank you.
Hey, thank you as well.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Okay.